The rancher had never imagined himself standing before the elders of an Apache village, offering words that would change the fate of a woman he barely knew. She was 30, tall enough to cast a long shadow across the dust, her presence both commanding and quiet. Her strength didn't come from height alone, but from the way she hid her fear, like a flame cupped inside trembling hands. He was 35, worn by sun and labor, a man who had learned long ago that the world rarely handed out kindness. Yet here he was, preparing to give the little he had to save someone who had never asked for anything. He had met her 2 nights earlier, bleeding from a gash across her ribs, her breath shallow, her steps wavering, but her pride intact. She had refused help at first, insisting she could walk herself back to her people, but he had seen the exhaustion in her eyes. He'd offered water, then a place to rest. Only later did he learn what chased her, a forced marriage to a violent man who saw her size as a challenge and her quietness as something to break. She hadn't asked him to interfere, but he couldn't walk away. Not when she clutched her arms around herself the way a child clings to warmth. Not when she looked at him with eyes that silently asked if the world held even a single safe place for her. The rancher spent the next morning thinking of every possible way to protect her. He had no money, no political way, no blood tie to her people. But he had courage. Rough, unpolished, but enough to push him forward when fear tried to anchor his feet. When they reached her village, whispers followed them like dust devils. People stared at the way he stood beside her, not in possession, but in protection. The man she had been promised to sneered from across the fire circle, his eyes dripping with entitlement. The rancher stepped closer to her, his voice low so only she could hear, telling her that she didn't have to face this alone. When he spoke before the elders, his voice trembled but didn't fail. He offered a solution that shocked even him, a fake marriage, a temporary union that would break the forced arrangement and give her the freedom to choose her own path. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The man who wanted her snarled, but the elders leaned forward, intrigued by the rancher's sincerity and the obvious fear in the woman's shoulders. She hadn't expected his offer. Her breath hitched, her eyes searching his for certainty. He nodded once, steady and sure, letting her know this wasn't charity. It was respect. After a long silence, the elders agreed. The forced marriage was void. The man who thought he owned her stormed away, cursing the dust beneath his feet. Relief washed over her like a sudden rain. She didn't hold the rancher's hand, but she stood close enough that their arms brushed, a quiet way of telling him she trusted him. That night by the fire, she thanked him with a voice that finally stopped trembling. And for the first time in a long time, the rancher felt like he had done something that mattered. Not for land, not for money, but for a woman who deserved a choice and a life all her own.